They found the house with all 7 chairs pulled up to the dining table, plates still full, bread still warm, but not a single soul remained. The farm was silent. No wind, no birds, no human sound of any kind, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to notice what it had swallowed whole. The year was 1885. The town was Birch Hollow, Texas, and what investigators discovered on that sun-bleached stretch of forgotten farmland was so unnatural, so far outside the boundaries of accepted science, that the report was buried within days, redacted, burned, or quietly locked away beneath the concrete floors of institutions that pretend to serve you. 7 brothers, each with a different discipline, each trained in European universities, each fluent in knowledge that men in Washington still feared to speak aloud. But what they did with that knowledge, what they built beneath that farm, what they unleashed into their own bloodline, was never meant to reach you. Until now. You were taught that history moves forward like a river, clean, orderly, predictable. But that's a lie. The truth is, there are places where the current twists backward, where forgotten minds tamper with the engine of human biology, where progress wears the face of madness, and where entire bloodlines vanish overnight, not because of violence, not because of war, but because they opened something they couldn't close. There was no plague, no fire, no chemical explosion, and yet not a single living creature remained on that farm. Not a dog, not a child, not a single one of the brothers who built the underground rooms, the mirrored walls, the false library, only a single phrase scrawled into the side of a steel cabinet in chalk. They saw what we became. This isn't folklore. It's not a legend. It's not something you'll find in history books, because this was erased, and now I'm going to tell you why. But I want you to understand so. Meeting before we go deeper, once you hear what I'm about to say, you don't get to unknow it. You don't get to go back to sleep. This story will change you. And maybe that's exactly what they were trying to stop. They arrived in Texas quietly. No grand announcement, no procession of wagons, no religious ceremony or town hall welcome. Just 7 men, 1 deed, and a farm already waiting for them. The locals said nothing, because they saw nothing. The land had been purchased months before by a silent partner in Europe, paid in gold, surveyed by night, fenced by men who never gave their names. But the brothers, they were different. Not just in dress, not just in speech, but in presence. You could feel it when they walked past, like the air bent slightly around them, as if the world was afraid to interrupt whatever they were thinking. They weren't farmers. That much was obvious. They carried no tools, drove no oxen, brought no wives or children, only books, crates of them, books with no titles, books with leather covers that reeked of something chemical and wrong. They also brought mirrors, dozens of them, not for vanity, not for decoration, but for observation. Of what no one knew, the house they built wasn't a house, not in the way men understood houses. It had no chimney, no windows on the north side, no upper rooms, but it had doors that went nowhere, and a cellar deeper than any man could dig without machines. For the first 6 months, no one was allowed inside. Supplies were left at the gate, money left in return. But not one neighbor set foot beyond the iron fence, until a sheriff's deputy went missing. Then 2 more men disappeared, and still no one dared approach the brothers, because by then, rumors had already begun. That the ground around their farm hummed at night, that the animals nearby were born with twisted limbs, that dreams near their land were different, longer, heavier, more vivid, and always ending in the same image, a staircase that goes down, but never up. Still, the law did nothing, because the brothers had licenses, charters, legal documents stamped with crests no one could identify. In languages only 2 men in the county could read. One of those men went mad, the other went silent, and so the farm was left alone. 7 brothers, 1 house, 1 great machine humming deep underground, and a silence that grew louder by the day. They were not normal men, and what they were building beneath the soil was not meant for any living thing. By the 7th month, the land around the farm changed. The grass grew in spirals, the trees bent slightly toward the house, and the birds stopped flying overhead. Men who rode past reported losing time. Some said their watches stopped. Others said their horses refused to move. One man said he heard a voice, his own, whispering from inside the well, but no one believed him, because believing him meant acknowledging that something was waking beneath that farm, something built with purpose and precision and ancient knowledge. It wasn't a mine. There were no shipments, no smoke, no wagons full of ore, and yet the sound of digging never stopped, always at night, always in rhythm, like a breath. Inhale, exhale, steel on stone, stone on steel. Then the blue light started, tiny, flickering, dancing along the tree line, hovering inches off the ground, too fast to be lanterns, too silent to be explained. A boy followed one of them once. He came back shaking, clothes torn, mouth full of blood, but no wounds on his body. He never spoke again. The brothers never left the property. But once in February, 2 of them appeared in town, their faces pale, eyes bloodshot, carrying a list of materials no local store carried. A local doctor saw them, said their pupils were dilated, their hands trembling, their teeth grinding even while standing still. But it was their skin that haunted him. He said it looked too smooth, too uniform, like they had been dipped in something. Boiled, maybe, or pressed. The items on the list made no sense. Mercury, sea salt, iron filings, sulfur, animal bones, dozens of mirrors, hundreds of candles, and something labelled only as Substrate 34. They paid in coins no one could identify, stamped with an emblem that looked like a 3-eyed serpent coiled around a cross. And when they left, the storekeeper burned the receipt because some part of him knew instinctively that a record of that transaction was a record. It of complicity. And complicity in whatever the brothers were building was a death sentence, because the deeper they dug, the louder the earth cried out, not with sound, but with memory. Memory older than man, older than language. They weren't excavating, they were awakening. And the farm was becoming a mouth. The day they activated it, the clouds didn't move, not even a flicker, as if the sky itself was watching, holding still, waiting. 3 men from the next county saw the flash, a pulse of white light that rippled across the horizon. Not a fire, not lightning, something else, something colder. That night, animals screamed. Coyotes ran in circles until their legs gave out. Cattle broke down fences to escape, and every dog within a 10-mile radius tried to claw through the floorboards of their owners' homes. Then came the silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, the kind that feels full, heavy, pressing down on your chest like a weight. The next morning everything seemed normal. But it wasn't. People started dreaming in foreign languages, dead tongues. Men spoke fluent Latin in their sleep. A child recited equations she'd never been taught. A woman woke up sobbing, said she saw herself, pregnant, in a room made of stone, surrounded by voices that weren't speaking, but were thinking, loud enough to split her skull. Something had been turned on, and it was changing them. They say the machine was built underground, deeper than any well, buried beneath 6 layers of iron shielding, powered by heat or blood, or both. No one ever saw it, but they felt it, in their bones, in their teeth, in the pauses between their thoughts. The farm glowed at night now, faintly, not visible to the eye, but to animals, to insects, to anything still pure. It pulsed like a heartbeat. What it did exactly, no one knows. But it had rules, patterns. It operated on a cycle, 33 hours on, 13 off,
And every 13th cycle, a sound, not a roar, not a hum, but a note. One single frequency that shattered glass, stunted crops, and made grown men weep without knowing why. The machine was not of this age, maybe not even of this world. It didn't work by fuel or pressure or electricity. It worked by memory, by thought, by resonance with something outside. The veil of our reality. And the brothers, they didn't build it to understand it. They built it to be changed by it. They thought it was just a sound, the 13th cycle, that long droning note, but it wasn't. It was a message, encoded, structured, repeating, not in words, but in pain. Every time it sounded, men would fall to their knees, eyes wide, mouths open, as if remembering something they had never lived through. And the dreams, they changed. No longer fragmented, no longer symbols. Now they were locations, dates, names, all in a script no one recognized. But everyone felt like heat or gravity. One man tried to write it down. He filled 64 pages without lifting his pen. Then he walked into a creek and drowned himself with his eyes still open. The message was not meant for us, but the brothers. They received it clearly. On the 13th cycle, they would all gather at the gate, all 7 standing still, hands clasped behind their backs, staring into the barn like it was a mirror. No one knows what they saw, but after each cycle, something about them changed. Their shadows grew longer, their voices deeper, their skin more reflective, as if light no longer bounced off them, but passed through and remembered. On the 7th, 13th cycle, they vanished for 3 days, all 7 gone. The farm silent, no humming, no lights, no dreams. And when they returned, the house was different. The doors had moved, the cellar had deepened, and the sky above it seemed off, not broken, not dark, just off, like something behind it was breathing. And the people in town, they stopped calling them brothers. They stopped calling them men. They just stopped, because to speak of them, to name them, was to invite the sound. And after a while, the sound came anyway. It bled through windows, through walls, through sleep. It whispered to the bones of the old. It sang to the minds of the young, and those who heard it twice were never the same again. So I will only ask you once. Are you ready to keep going? Because if you are, then type these words in. The comments twice to lock it in. I hear the 13th sound. I hear the 13th sound. And once you do, there is no going back. The land remembered long before the brothers arrived. You could feel it in the ground, like static, like sorrow. Farmhands said the soil was too soft in some places, too hard in others. It breathed. That's what one man said. The dirt breathes. They laughed at him until he took a shovel and dug until the metal snapped. What he hit wasn't rock. It rang like iron. But it had grooves, patterns, almost like writing, or circuitry. 2 days later he went blind, then mute, then he vanished. That hole in the field, it filled itself back in overnight. The earth here doesn't forget. Because this wasn't just a farm, it was a wound. And the brothers, they didn't choose this land, it chose them. Old maps of the area show nothing. But satellite imaging taken a century later shows strange geometry beneath the topsoil. Perfect arcs, endless lines, intersecting at a single point beneath the house. Ley lines, that's what some called them. Energy pathways, used by civilizations that predate even memory. But this was deeper, older. Whatever pulsed beneath that farm had been pulsing since before time had names. The brothers weren't mining, they were tuning, adjusting the farm like a musician adjusts an instrument. The machine was not the only technology. The land itself was part of it. The topography, the water table, the minerals, all of it had to align.
Every fence post, every room, every tree planted was deliberate. Not one nail out of place, because if it was, the cycle would break. And if the cycle broke, they believed something would wake up early, and what terrified them most was not that it would wake, but that it would recognize them, because you don't build a machine to open a door unless you're sure of what's on the other side. They weren't sure, but they built it anyway, because whatever lived beneath the soil, it was whispering to them, in dreams, in reflections, in the deep hum of silence before sleep, and they listened because men like that always listen to the thing that promises power, no matter the cost. It started with a floorboard, loose in the main hallway. A boy playing hide-and-seek kicked it by accident, and it moved. Beneath it, a staircase, narrow, spiraling down into darkness that felt too deep for a single-story house. The boy never made it down. He screamed before the second step, and was pulled back up by his cousin, who swore the scream came from somewhere else, not below, but behind her eyes. The brothers sealed the floorboard within the hour, but the children kept drawing it. That spiral staircase, black, descending, lit by floating candles that made no shadows. One child said the steps were alive. Another said each one had a name. One girl refused to speak, only wrote the same sentence over and over on her wall. The room at the bottom knows my name. So the townsfolk came. 3 men with lanterns, 2 rifles, and a priest who had seen things in Mexico that made him believe nothing could still surprise him. They entered through the front door. The brothers let them, silent, smiling, like they already knew what would happen. The men searched the house top to bottom, every cupboard, every closet, every locked drawer, nothing. No staircase, no room, no floorboard out of place. But the priest, he wouldn't leave. He stared at the west wall of the sitting room, kept muttering, "There's pressure here. There's weight." He placed his hand flat on the wall and said, "It's listening." They dragged him out screaming. He tore his fingernails trying to claw his way back in. That night he walked back alone, carrying nothing but a single candle. They found his body the next morning, 3 miles away, naked, eyes wide, no visible wounds, but his skin was covered in spirals, burned into the flesh, patterns that made grown men dizzy just by looking at them. That's when they realized the room didn't exist in this house. Not exactly. It was a place that appeared only when it was ready, not when they searched for it, but when it searched for them. And when it found you, it took something you didn't even know you had. They called it the listening room, not because it listened, but because it made you listen, to things not meant for human ears. It didn't appear often, but when it did, people changed. One brother, Elias, sat inside for 3 minutes. Or so they thought. When he came out, he said it had only been a second, but his hair had turned completely white. His eyes didn't track movement anymore, and he began to speak in a voice that wasn't his, not louder, not deeper, just wrong. He spoke of colors that had no name, sounds that melted thoughts, spirits with no shape, and questions so old that even time forgot them. Then he stopped speaking altogether and began carving symbols into the wooden beams of the barn, then into the walls of the house, then into his own arms. He said the symbols kept the room from waking, but the others disagreed. They believed he was feeding it, giving it structure, making it stronger. And then the cows began dying, one by one, tongues bloated, eyes rolled back, no wounds, just fear, etched into their faces, like they had seen something. Right before the heart stopped, Elias said the room needed silence. That noise drew it out, that even a whisper could summon the spiral. So they stopped speaking in the house, communicated only by tapping on walls or sliding paper under doors. But even silence wasn't enough. One night, the youngest brother, Thomas, laughed in his sleep. A low, soft giggle, like a child hearing a secret. The next morning he was gone. Bed untouched, window locked, floor undisturbed. Except for one thing, a spiral scratched into the ceiling above his bed, too high for anyone to reach. That's when they knew. It wasn't the room that moved. It was the house. The entire structure had become a listening device. The walls, the floorboards, even the chimney. Every nail and joint tuned to vibration, waiting for sound, waiting to awaken. And so they stopped sleeping, because when the mind drifts, it speaks. And when it speaks, the room listens. And once it's heard you, it never forgets. The spiral wasn't just decoration. It wasn't madness either. Not random, not chaotic. It repeated everywhere, burned into the fireplace stone, etched in frost on the window glass, even carved deep into the bark of a tree behind the barn, so deep that the tree bled. But it wasn't until Levi found the old journal that they understood what it really was. It belonged to someone named Henry Groves, written in 1811. A man no one remembered, a name not buried in the town cemetery, no record at the courthouse, as if the land itself erased him. Inside the journal, drawings, spirals, each one slightly different, but all connecting, all pointing inward. It wasn't a symbol. It was a map. But not of land, of sound. Henry had been measuring frequencies, tones, vibrations, things that couldn't be heard with human ears, things felt in the bones, dreamt in sleep. He called it the crawl of language. He said the spiral was the shape of an idea trying to become real, and that if enough people heard it, listened the wrong way, it would step through. He called the place he built the throat, said the house was designed to hum, to echo, to carry sound like a living thing, a mouth with no tongue, a throat with no end. Elias was right. They hadn't been living on a farm. They'd been living inside an instrument, a structure tuned to madness, to memory, to invitation. And something had started answering. Levi found that out too late. Because after reading the journal, he went silent. Didn't eat, didn't blink, just stood in the hallway for 6 hours straight. When he finally moved, he walked to the barn and screamed once, not a scream of pain, but of release. Then silence. The other brothers found nothing but a circle of ash where he stood, and at the center another spiral, smaller, tighter, sharper, as if something had twisted space itself, compressed it, marked it. They tried to burn the journal, but the fire went cold, not out, cold like it had read. Versed drained the heat instead of creating it. They buried it instead, 10 feet deep, under rock and soil. But still, every night after that, they heard pages turning beneath the floorboards, and if they listened too closely, the spiral moved. At first, they thought it was wind, low and distant, a kind of moan, like the house was sighing. But it came from beneath them, always beneath. No matter where they walked, the sound followed, a gentle hum, growing louder at night, throbbing through the floorboards, pulsing like a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Caleb put his ear to the wood, once, only once, and jerked back so hard he cracked his head on the wall. He said it wasn't sound, it was voices. Hundreds, singing. But it wasn't a song with words. It was tones, stacked and twisted together, a harmony of something ancient, something wrong. They tested it, placed glass jars on the floor overnight, and in the morning the jars were shattered. From the inside out, Ezekiel said the house was vibrating, tuned to a frequency the human ear couldn't register, but the body could feel it, and something beneath the house was responding. They dug, found nothing, then dug deeper, still nothing, but the singing didn't stop. In fact, it got clearer. One night, Noah said he could make out a pattern, the same melody over and over, spiraling in on itself, repeating until it wasn't music anymore. Just noise, then a whisper, then something else. He called it a summons. Elias refused to sleep in the house after that, built a cot in the barn. But even there, the sound found him. He dreamed of doors, endless hallways, and voices behind the walls calling his name. Not screaming, not pleading, but inviting. Come down, come see, come here. And on the 7th night, he did. They found the trap door in the cellar open, candles lit all around the edge, no sign of Elias, just his boots, and a trail of salt spilled in a perfect circle. And beneath that, the hum. The brothers stood still, listening, fighting the urge to step forward, to lean down, to put their ears to the dark. And as they listened, the choir sang louder, not just from below, but inside their chests, behind their eyes, and in that myrrh. Moment, each of them realized something terrifying. The sound wasn't just coming from under the house, it was coming from inside the house, inside them. And it was getting louder. There were 7 brothers, but when the town spoke of them, they only ever named 6. Elias, Caleb, Noah, Malachi, Gideon, Ezekiel, the 7th. They never mentioned, not out of forgetfulness, not fear, but something deeper, something closer to shame or guilt. In the earliest photo of the family, a faded black and white image torn along the edges, there's a boy standing slightly apart, his face blurred, not by damage but by motion, like he was turning away or refusing to be captured. His clothes don't match the others. He wears a heavy coat. In summer, and his hands, they aren't resting at his sides, they're behind his back, as if restrained. His name was Asa. He was the first, born months before the others, but never quite with them. He didn't speak until he was nearly 5, didn't cry when he was born, didn't make eye contact, didn't smile. The mother, Miriam, was said to whisper strange prayers at night, said she had been warned about the firstborn, that he was marked, not cursed, but chosen. By something ancient, Asa's room was locked from the outside. He wasn't allowed near the barn, wasn't allowed to eat with the rest. The brothers, even as children, were told never to be alone with him. But Asa, he knew things. Before they happened, he predicted the death of their father, described the accident before it occurred. He drew symbols in ash on the walls, spoke in reversed language in his sleep. And when the animals began dying, one by one, the family blamed the foxes, then the sickness. But Asa smiled, said it was necessary. One day, he vanished. No police, no search, no obituary. The family never filed a report. When asked, they would say, "We had 6 sons." But at night, in the fields, the boys would hear scratching beneath the dirt. Not animals, not roots, something trying to surface. And sometimes, when the wind moved just right, they'd hear footsteps on the roof. Even though no one was up there, Ezekiel once swore he saw Asa's coat, hanging in the tree behind the house, swinging slowly like it had never left. They never spoke his name after that, never even whispered it, because somehow they knew Asa had never left the farm. He had simply gone under it, and he was still waiting. Most families bury their dead, with stone markers, dates, a verse, something to hold the memory in place, but not the Carvers. 7 brothers, and not a single grave on the land. No tombstones behind the house. No wooden crosses. No mound of dirt. Nothing. When the last living neighbor, an old woman named Edna, was asked what she remembered, she didn't hesitate. She said they buried nothing because there were no bodies to bury. The earth never gave them back. When the fire finally reached the farmhouse, what remained was blackened timber, molten glass, and scorched furniture, but no bones, no teeth, no ash that tested human. The investigators searched for days, peeling back layers of soil, charred floorboards, cellar stone. What they found instead were pits, perfect circles, 6 feet deep, some even deeper, but no coffins, no signs of burial, just hollow places, like something had been taken, or worse, had crawled out. One deputy refused to go back. said he felt pulled toward one of the pits, like gravity had shifted. He described the sensation as standing on the edge of a voice, one that was waiting for him to fall in. They sealed off the property, called it unstable, declared it a hazard zone. But those who lived near the tree line said the ground still breathed. In the early mornings, when the fog sat low, you could see it, arise and fall, like something beneath the earth was still alive, still waiting. And then there was the sound. At first, it was mistaken for wind, but it came even on still nights. A low hum, almost melodic, like a chant, and always in sevens. 7 notes, 7 rises, 7 beats of silence. Those who dared trespass didn't last long. One group of teens, filming for a ghost channel, found the old foundation. They laughed, mocked the legend, spat into the empty cellar. By morning, one of them was missing. Shoes found at the edge of a pit. No footprints leading away, just the same hum, echoing. Up through the soil, no graves, because the farm didn't let go. It swallowed what was given and kept it quiet. Not for peace, but for power. They shouldn't have brought a camera, but they did. One of the boys in that group, the one who vanished, had clipped a small recorder to his backpack strap. When the search party found it still blinking, still warm, they handed it to the sheriff. He listened to all 3 hours, alone in his office, then locked the door and wouldn't speak for 2 days. But copies had already been made, and one of those copies slipped out into the hands of a man named Harris, a sound engineer, retired military. He spent weeks analyzing it, filtering the background noise, slowing the waveform, mapping the frequencies. What he discovered wasn't just sound, it was speech, not in English, not in anything listed among Earth's languages, but it had structure, cadence, rules, patterns, meaning. One phrase, repeated 6 times, before the 7th and final tone, translated loosely. It meant, the offering has not been accepted. Then silence. Not the kind that comes from absence, but the kind that feels like watching. As if something, somewhere, had paused to stare. The boy's scream came after that. Sudden, short, not pain, not fear, but confusion. And then, nothing. No wind, no footsteps, not even the mechanical hum of the camera. Just a final low pulse that made the waveform glitch, split sideways, and crawl. When Harris played that final pulse back, he noticed something he hadn't before. Behind it, hidden deep in the audio field, were voices, layered dozens thick, all saying the same word. Return, over and over. Return, return, return. Until the tape hissed, melted, and burned the player. It wasn't a warning. It was a demand. Something on that farm wasn't done, and it wanted the 7th. That's when the pattern made sense. 7 brothers, 7 notes, 7 pits, 6 taken, 1 left behind, the one who never spoke to reporters, never came to town, never looked anyone in the eyes. Jacob Carver, the youngest, the last, and maybe the key. He was the quiet one, always had been. Jacob Carver, youngest of the 7, born during a thunderstorm that cracked the sky in half, born with eyes too dark, too still. Neighbors said he never cried. Not once. Not when he scraped his knee. Not when he lost his mother. Not when the others vanished. He just stood there, in the doorway of that creaking house, watching the search parties, watching the coffins go by, blank face, unblinking. When the sheriff finally asked to speak to him, Jacob only said one thing: "They're not gone. They're listening." Then he shut the door and nailed it shut from the inside. That was the last time anyone saw him, until 2 years later. A fire started on the edge of the property. Old dry grass ignited under a red sky. Volunteer crews came rushing in, and what they found when they crossed the field wasn't just a fire, it was a ring, perfectly shaped, a circle of scorched earth, encircling the house but not touching it. Inside, Everything was untouched, dusty, frozen in time, dishes still on the table, one chair pulled out, one candle melted down, and in the corner of the room facing the basement door sat Jacob. Alive, thin, staring straight ahead. He didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. Not visibly. But when they tried to move him, he whispered, "You'll wake them. They're almost full." Then he screamed, a sound so high, so sharp, that the glass in their flashlights burst. The team ran, left everything behind. The house, the boy, the silence. No one dared go back. 2 weeks later, the Carver house was gone. Not burned, not torn down. Gone. Only the basement stairs remained, and they led nowhere. Just dirt. The official report said Jacob died in the fire. But there was no body, no bones, no ash. Just a perfect circle, and a name carved into the field in blackened earth, Jacob, and beneath it one word awaiting. They thought it was a cellar, just a place to store winter apples, canned goods, old tools. But the truth was older and hungrier. When the Carver brothers rebuilt the farmhouse in 1859, they kept one thing from the original foundation, the stone well, buried beneath the floorboards, surrounded by concrete, covered by a heavy oak trapdoor. No one questioned it. It was just part of the land, but that was the year the animals started disappearing. First chickens, then goats, then a full-grown ox, gone without a sound. No blood, no prints, just the faint smell of sulfur and the sound of dripping water. The youngest, Jacob, would stare at the floorboards. Sometimes he'd sleep on them, ear pressed to the wood. When asked why, he said it sang to him, a song with no words, but he understood the meaning. Feed me, and I will protect you. Ignore me, and you will rot like the others. The other brothers laughed it off, until one night, while digging fence posts, Samuel struck stone just beneath the grass. It wasn't natural. A carved shape, worn smooth, a circle with 7 teeth. He brought it inside, placed it on the mantel. That night, the dreams began. All 7 of them saw the same thing, a writhing figure shaped like a man, but with no face, only holes. It stood beneath the house and waited. The next morning, Thomas, the oldest, went down to the basement with a sack of raw meat. He came up empty-handed, said nothing, just smiled. After that, things got worse. The crops grew too fast, then rotted in place. Rain came only at night, and always sounded like footsteps. The wind started to whisper names, their names. Still, they kept feeding it. Not because they were scared, but because they started to feel strong, invincible, like gods, until one of them forgot a meal, and the thing in the well, reached out and took more than just meat. It took the voice of the land, the soul of the house, the names off the headstones. It took them one by one, and still the trapdoor remains, sealed from above, but not from below. They called her Widow Callahan, a name soaked in grief. She was the last to live near the Carver farm, after the brothers vanished, after the fields went dry, after even the birds stopped flying over, but she stayed. She said the house whispered when no one else could hear it, said it wasn't evil, just misunderstood, said the boys didn't die, they changed, and change is sacred if it comes from beneath. She never locked her door, never lit candles, never prayed. She would sit on the porch. Every night, watching the house in the distance, wrapped in mist, like something half awake, the town begged her to leave, offered money, offered land. She refused. They said she was cursed, said she drank from the poisoned well, but no one dared test her. One man tried, a drifter, passed through on horseback, claimed he didn't believe in ghosts or devils. He walked into her house just before dusk. said he was going to spend the night. Laugh in the face of it all. He never came out. In the morning, the front door stood open. The fire still burned in the hearth, a pot of stew still simmered, but no trace of him. Except for his horse, still tied to the post, foaming at the mouth, eyes bloodshot, staring at the Carver farm. When asked about it, Widow Callahan only smiled, said he saw too much. He heard the real song, and the song does not forget those who listen. She lived another 7 years, never aged, never limped, never blinked too long. They say on her final night, she walked barefoot into the Carver house, through the rotten door, down the broken stairs, lifted the trap door with ease and disappeared. Not a single scream, not a trace of blood, just silence. And then, from deep below the earth, a single knock, as if saying thank you. She wasn't a widow, not any more. She was its bride. The trapdoor was never built by human hands. That much became clear the deeper they looked, notched with symbols, not carved, branded, burned in, etched by something older than heat, older than fire. No hinges. Yet it moved like it wanted to, like it had lungs, like it waited. Sheriff Mallory saw it first, back in '92. After the last investigation team never came back. He wasn't supposed to be there. He went alone, out of guilt, out of anger. Or maybe something called him. He said the trapdoor wasn't wood. It looked like wood, but felt like skin. Tensed when touched, moist when the air was still, and it pulsed. He heard a hum, not loud, not music, just a low thrum, like blood behind your eyes, like a heartbeat under your floorboards. He said he placed his palm on it, just once, and something opened, not the trapdoor. Something in him. Memories he didn't own. Images of brothers kneeling in mud. Eyes rolled back. Voices speaking a language that cracked the skull. A circle of hands. A father, not of flesh. A lesson not written, but absorbed through bone. He ran, but the door stayed with him. He felt it. Every night, in dreams, in reflections. In the silence between seconds, he tried to burn it down. 2 years later, doused the whole foundation in kerosene. Lit the match. Watched the flames rise. But nothing caught. The fire refused, sputtered, fell. Then he heard the breathing again, this time behind him, inside his ear. He turned, and no one was there. Except the shadow, standing at the edge of the field, shaped like a man, but wrong, too long, too calm. It raised one hand, pointed down. The trapdoor had followed him. He put a bullet in his head that night, left a note. 4 words. It opened in me. The trapdoor never left the Carver house. But it was never meant to. It opens in those who try to understand it, and it always remembers who tried. They found the box in a closet no one remembered, buried beneath blankets, behind a wall panel, as if the house itself was ashamed of it. A shoebox, old frayed, covered in dust, thick like ash. Inside, photographs, dozens of them, faded, sepia-toned. But the strange part wasn't the images. It was the sound. When you held them, you heard whispers, not from the room, from the paper, soft, fragmented, words you couldn't place, but they clung to your spine like cold fingers. The photos showed the 7 brothers, at first, in fields, smiling, hands dirty with work, faces calm, normal. Then the changes began. In each photo their faces shifted, slightly, eyes farther apart, smiles wider than they should be, skin tone darker, then too pale, then almost translucent. One photo, midway through the stack, had no one in it, just the barn, empty. But if you stared too long, shapes began to form. Slowly, in the shadows, the last 7 photos were the worst, each one taken from inside the house. Looking out, but not from any window, from beneath the floorboards, as if someone or something was lying underneath, watching. And in every photo, you could see feet, just feet, bare, filthy, not moving. Then, in the final image, all 7 brothers stood in the same frame, facing away, looking into the woods, their bodies rigid, identical, and something was standing behind them, tall, thin, faceless, its arms hanging too low, its head tilted sideways, as if it didn't understand what it was looking at, or was waiting for permission. The person who found the box tried to burn the photographs. They refused to catch flame, even soaked in lighter fluid. The fire curled around the edges, but would not consume. And the whispers grew louder. One word repeated, over and over, barely audible, but undeniable. Come. They locked the box in the evidence vault. The whispering never stopped. Officers reported headaches, nosebleeds, missing time. After 7 days, the vault door was open, the box was gone, and on the floor, 7 fresh photographs, still wet. Each one showed a different angle of the farmhouse. At night, and in the distance, a figure standing beneath the dead tree, always watching, always closer. It happened just after midnight. The wind stopped, the animals froze, and the moon turned a shade of red no one had ever seen before. The cornfields, once thick with dry, rustling stalks, fell silent, not like stillness, but like something holding its breath. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not wind, but a high-frequency hum, like the air itself had cracked open. The family who owned the land, the Winslows, said they felt a pressure, like something invisible pressing down on their chest. Their skin went cold. Their eyes teared without emotion. Then they saw it. The corn turned white, not pale, not dry, but white like bone. And then it began to shimmer, each stalk, each leaf, slowly hardening, becoming reflective, solid, sharp, glass. The whole field became a maze of blades, tall, unmoving, deadly. And then the screams began. But they didn't come from the house. They came from the field. Voices, all male, 7 of them, crying, begging, some laughing, one just whispering the same word again and again. Forgive. The Winslows never had sons. They called the sheriff. But by the time he arrived, the field was normal. Back to green, back to rustling, back to waving in the night breeze. But not a single stalk was broken. Not a single one bent. He didn't believe them until he saw the footprints. 7 pairs, barefoot, deep in the soil, tracked in perfect circles around the house, and in the center of the yard, a single pile of glass, shards, dripping with blood, fresh, still warm. The sheriff didn't speak. He radioed for help. But the signal died, and as he backed away, the wind stopped again, the corn shifted, not from breeze, but like it was breathing. And from somewhere deep in that field, that same hum returned. Low, hungry, patient, the glass shards began to vibrate, then rise slowly, as if remembering their shape, and all 7 footprints started to walk again, but no one was there. There were 7 of them, that much the town remembers, but their names, their full names, were never written down, not in the church registry, not in school records, not in the census, as if they were born already erased. Old Man Weaver, the last living person to claim he saw them, said they were always together, 7 boys, same height, same stare, same silence. They never spoke to others, only to each other, in whispers, in a language no one could trace, Not Latin, not German, not anything the elders recognized. They would sit for hours on the edge of the Winslow farm, staring at the corn, not playing, not moving, just staring. And then one day, they were gone. No missing persons report, no family came forward, no burial, no graves, just gone. And when people asked, the Winslows would say they were never really here. But every year, on the first harvest moon, the corn would grow faster, taller, sharper, and the wind would carry that same hum, low, almost beneath hearing, and if you walk far enough into the field, just past the place where the sunlight fades too early, you'll find it. A circle, perfect, burnt into the ground, and in the middle, 7 child-sized impressions in the dirt, still warm, still soft, like something had been lying there just moments ago. The church tried to cleanse the land. 3 pastors came. 1 went blind, 1 disappeared. The last, he lit himself on fire during Sunday service. The town stopped asking questions after that. The Winslows left, the farm abandoned, but the corn still grows. And every year, 1 traveller, 1 hunter, 1 curious wanderer doesn't come back. Only their shoes are found, neatly placed at the edge of the circle, and the whispers begin again. They say you can hear the names if you listen long enough, but only if you've already forgotten your own, because the field doesn't just remember, it replaces. 7 in, 7 gone, 7 more drawn in, and so it continues, a cycle, no, bit of nature, but of something older, something that feeds on names, on memory, on blood, and the town, still standing, still silent, pretends the field is just a field, but no one farms it, no one mows it, no one walks past it after dark, because deep down they know the 7 never left. They just became something else, something that breathes through corn stalks, that watches through shattered glass, that waits for the next one to forget who they are and walk barefoot into the wind.